enough, you came into this room, last thing on your mind was praying every day for unreached people in October. And maybe God is saying, I missed that. 10 seconds a day, or a minute, 10 minutes. Or it might mean walking to the ministry hall right over there and becoming a partner in Ukrainian orphans' lives with Carl and Mary Barrett's creative ministry. Or it might mean heading that direction, downtown, where our local abortion clinic, Midwest Health Center for Women, has moved out of the 9th floor of that medical building that you see when you walk out here, and has moved down to 5th Street, to Hennepin, in a building where there's an alternative high school and a little police precinct underneath, and this time, only one entrance. Only one entrance. And with Sarah and Naomi, you can join up and love women in crisis and show them a better way. Or it might mean going to the home, and at this point in my sermon in the first service, I looked right over here to where Glenn was sitting, and said it might mean going to the home of Glenn and Patty, or some other home where people walk moment by moment on the brink of eternity and just do what needs to be done. Or it might mean going to page 18 in this book, where all those agencies are listed where you can get involved in ministering to the suffering, persecuted church. Or it might mean getting on the telephone this afternoon and making one of the hardest calls of your life to a dad or a son or a sister or an uncle who you know is running headlong into destruction. And they need to be pleaded with against all odds that they will listen. Or it might mean that the Calvary Road is the path from my back door to Eb's back door, who doesn't know Jesus yet. We try and try, figure out how to say it, and you try again. Or it might mean that when you read in the Star that there are low-paying jobs in the office of Bethlehem, you check them out. You know that you go home at the end of the day unrequited for your hard work, with adequate pay, and sleep like a baby because it really mattered what you did. My plea, however, as I close, is a little different than all of those ideas. And I know this is not Missions Week, though I feel it in my bones with this text. I feel God on me saying, do this with this text as we close. Namely, some of you in this room, there are a lot of college students in this room right now, I know. But I say to you, young, single people, but I also say there are a lot of retired people in this room. This is an interesting service. All of our older people are in this service, and all of our college students are in this service. So this is a hard service to do. So I say to the retired people, and I say to the young people, your roots are not as firm, your course is not as fixed. The retired people have less energy perhaps, but still quite a bit of energy, but a lot of freedom. A lot of freedom to do a new thing with life. And then there are all of you in the middle who think that because you got kids or married and just starting a new job or whatever, my call is consider seriously this morning, earnestly, passionately, whether verse 13, let us go outside the camp, bearing abuse and reproach with him on the Calvary Road, moving toward Golgotha, trying to meet needs rather than maximize comforts. Let's go might be the Great Commission spoken this morning. I told you on Monday, I'm going down to, tomorrow, I'm going down to Orlando to speak at a missions conference. I'm taking this sermon. I didn't know I was going to take this sermon until I wrote it yesterday. But I'm taking this sermon, and I'm gonna plead for dozens of seminarians to walk out of the securities of the pastor, comfortable, well-paid, retirement-laden, strokes from the people, kids in good schools, 911 available, law-abiding by and large, even in Philip's neighborhood. Leave it! That's what I'm going to call them too. In order to go to places, there are hundreds of people groups that have no church, no agencies, no witness, nothing to bring them to Christ. And he's calling some of you to go. And here's the reason I know that. Revelation 5:11 tells us why Jesus went outside the camp and died. Thou wast slain, and by thy blood didst ransom men for God from every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and hast made them a kingdom, priests to our God, and they shall reign on earth. Christ died for the nations. Therefore, when verse 13 says, let us go to him out there, surely some of you are going to hear him say, for the nations. Let's leave the camp of Bethlehem. Let's leave the camp of my job. Let's leave the camp of America and go. I'm not doing that this morning. I want to close with a hymn of consecration. I want to tell you what many of you, when you lay your eyes on this hymn, will know already why this hymn is so significant to close with. There's a story behind it. And you know the story, many of you. This is the hymn that was the favorite hymn of Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, Ed McCulley, Peter Fleming, Roger Youderian, the 5 missionaries who moved toward need, away from comfort, onto Palm Beach in the jungles of Ecuador, and were speared to death by those whose needs they were trying to meet. 2 days before they left, according to Elizabeth Elliot in her story, Through Gates of Splendor, they sang this hymn. Maybe even that very morning. And she writes, at the close of their prayers, the 5 men sang one of their favorite hymns, We Rest on Thee, to the stirring tune of Finlandia. Jim and Ed had sung this hymn since college days and knew the verses by heart. On the last verse, their voices rang out with deep conviction. We rest on Thee, our shield and our defender. Thine is the battle, Thine shall be the praise. When passing through the gates of pearly splendor, victors, we rest with Thee through endless days. And they went and they died, moving toward need, not comfort, moving toward the paradise to come and leaving the paradise of America behind. And when they died, Jim Elliot's credo came true. He is no fool. He gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Why? For here we have no lasting city, but we seek a city that is to come. Not a lake home, not a perfect marriage, not a big retirement plan. We seek the city, the New Jerusalem, the Zion, where God in undiminished glory reigns. And with that, we are free to move toward need, not comfort.
This is Light and Truth, God-centered preaching to help you see Christ clearly and treasure Him truly. I'm your host, Dan Kruver. Thank you for listening. On our next episode, John Piper begins a 9-part series titled The Divided Man. I hope you'll join us. For more resources, visit desiringgod.org.
In other words, you could choose wrong on this text and have an absolutely excellent understanding of the Christian life as a total. Because there's so many other passages that ought to feed into your understanding of the Christian life.
Is Romans 7:14-25 describing a Christian or a non-Christian? In this episode of Light and Truth, John Piper shows how God's righteousness in Christ transforms our view both of sin and the law, regardless of the answer. This sermon was originally delivered at Bethlehem Baptist Church on May 27, 2001.
This is one of the most famous and one of the most controversial texts in the book of Romans. It's got this famous verse 19 in it. The good that I want to do, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. So we have a kind of divided man here, right? A divided heart or mind. He says, there's part of me, he calls it I, who wants to do good, doesn't want to do evil. And then he says, there's another part of me, he calls it I, who does not do the good that I want, but does the evil I don't want. And the controversy around this text is, who is this man? That is it Paul the Christian or Paul the pre-Christian? Or maybe more precisely, is it the morally conscience awakened pre-conversion Paul through the eyes of faith? Or is it the baby Christian carnal Paul before fullness? Or is it the mature Paul in a lapsed condition of temporary failure? Now, the biblical commentators spread out all over the map on these interpretations, and I'm not going to tell you this morning which I think is correct, but I will later. What I want to do this morning is prepare you to handle this ambiguity and then tell you why I think the main point of the text doesn't depend on it. So first, what do you do with it? I don't think that your total view of the Christian life has to be ruined by getting one text wrong. In other words, you could choose wrong on this text and have an absolutely excellent understanding of the Christian life as a total. Because there's so many other passages that ought to feed into your understanding of the Christian life. So, for example, you could say, this text is not about Christian experience, and yet still believe Christians have these kinds of experiences. But that's just not what this text is talking about. Or you could say, this text is about Christian experience, but that's not normative for Christian experience. The Bible holds out a lot higher hope for how to live than in that defeated condition. So what you decide on this text does not make or break the totality of what you see the New Testament to be teaching about how mature, how strong, how successful, how victorious the Christian life can be. So let's try to get at what the main point of the text is. That is, what's the point of Romans 7:14-25 in the flow of the book of Romans? The main point of the book of Romans is this: